input, your suggestions, your ideas going forward as to what kind of topics you would like to explore, what you would like to learn about, hear about. And we already have a good number of folks that are ready to come in over the next couple of months and speak on a vast array of topics, from drug and alcohol use to psychedelics, I think is something that we're also going to be talking about, and many, many other things. But we want to welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us, for tuning in. This is an opportunity for you to post some comments, some questions that you have. And at some point, eventually, we're hoping to kind of move this into a live audience setting here on North Main Street in Barrie. But we're starting out virtually. We're coming to you no matter where you are. On your phone, on your computer, maybe you're driving, you're taking us along with you today. We appreciate your eyes and your ears. Paul Brody, our guest, Identifying and Overcoming Resistance. Again, this is episode 1 of a speaker series that we are so excited about. Paul.
All right, thanks, JD.
Yeah, man.
This is a good reset because I didn't like the way the last one started off. Yeah. So, all right, let's. I'm instead of going right into the definitions of resistance and stuff like that, I'm going to show this little thing first. Actually, I got to remember what I was going to do with this. Oh yeah, so just this is something to be aware of. This is you. All right, that's you. That's your true, authentic self. The light, I mean, not the flashlight thing, but the light. The light represents you. This is you, your spirit, your soul, whatever you want to call it, your authentic self is the terminology I like to use. You are light, and through the process of living, sometimes things get in front of this light like that. Now you can still see it. You can still see the light, even though there's something in front of it. Sometimes more stuff gets in front of it. That's harder to see the light. I'll just fold this over one more time. I don't know if you can see the light through it all. I guess if I could press right up against it. But so you can see that sometimes stuff comes into our life and it blocks our true self. This is a little bit thicker, so you probably can't see the light through that at all. The light's still there, still on, but you don't see it. You're not aware of it. You don't feel it. This, the paper, whatever, anything that's in front of this, blocking this, represents ego. So that's an important definition for this too. Ego is the illusion of self, in my terminology, the way I work with it. So you have your authentic self, what you are, the light, the spirit inside of you, what makes you a living being. And then you have the ego, is all the things that you collect throughout life. So the paper, the hat, that represents the different experiences that we have, all the stuff that we pick up along the way, our preferences, our dislikes, our fears, the things that we find joy in, our memories, all of our experiences, connections, relationships, all of that stuff represents that. Some of those things can get in the way of recognizing who we truly are. That's the illusion. That's the ego. That's the illusion of self. And when we're talking about identifying and overcoming resistance, we want to look at what is it that makes up that ego. The ego is the source of the resistance. Now, we can look at resistance in different ways. The straight up definition of resistance. Let me look. I wrote it down. I mean, we can all kind of guess what we know what it means. Basically, the refusal to comply with or accept something. I don't know. I had to look that up, but so when something comes into your life and you don't want to experience it, you resist it. Now, resistance can also be beneficial. If you've read or listened to the book "The War of Art" by Stephen Pressfield, he talks about resistance as being necessary for growth and for creativity. He says the blank screen in front of you, if you're a writer, represents resistance. Sitting down with your instrument and not having an idea of where to go next, that could be a resistance. And that resistance is necessary in order to move you forward. And JD typed a message to me, and then that threw me off. That's not going to work.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. That's my fault. And so resistance sometimes is necessary from that perspective. But that's not how I'm looking at it. Resistance is something that we don't want in this case. And so what we're refusing in the context of today's talk or topic of discussion is emotion. JD, you don't have those images. We didn't get that far in the preparations, do you?
Was it on Messenger?
I emailed it to you.
Okay.
If you can find the one, there's one called Emotion, if you can find that one.
Yeah.
So I drew a little picture to go with this, but we were hung up on the audio part before, so but he'll pull it up here in a second. Essentially, emotion, I look at it as energy in motion. It's not my terminology. I've seen that before, so it's not something I've invented. Emotion, so energy in motion. And where does that come from, that emotion? It comes from within us. So we're the ones that create it. We originate inside of us. Now, when we are dealing with all of this stuff that's blocking that light, the ego things that get in the way, that's not the one. It's called emotion. I'm looking at JD's computer over his shoulder. Scroll up, go up. It's the first message. That was the second message.
Okay.
If you can see the first one. Nope, not that one. I'm going to make JD sweat now. He's going to feel uncomfortable. No, all right, it was that message. I replied to the same one. You had the right email chain, I think. Go up. There's nothing above that? Okay.
No.
Yeah, it should be on that first one. All right, never mind. Whatever. Anyway, okay, so look at my body, right? And so if you're familiar, there you go. Second one with all the colors. That's the one. There you go. Share that. All right, perfect. You don't have to use me as the example. Okay. There we go. That's a person. You see that being sitting down. And if you're familiar with chakras or energy centers, there's different ways with the terminology for them. There's 7 primary chakras or primary energy centers. Now, for me, I don't know if this isn't, nothing I'm saying today is truth. These are all my opinions. These are all theories. This is all stuff that I've picked up along the way, and I have found to be useful in my experience with life, helping me to have greater peace inside with less disruption, interacting with the things outside. So I don't share this in trying to say that this is the way it is, but I'm sharing it in the hope that it inspires something inside of you, that you might think about something differently, or find that this isn't the way you want to think about things at all, whatever it is. But we're just looking at inspiring and expanding our thoughts. If you like this idea or you want to entertain this idea, there's 7 primary energy centers in the body. Those are the general areas of them, and the names of the chakras on the side, and colors associated with them. You think of it like an energy spiral at each of those points on the body. Now, I feel like these energy centers are the places where we create the emotion. So the energy in motion, the emotion, is created at these energy centers, and it spirals out. If something happens outside of me in the external world, then my body receives it. It interacts with my body. My body responds to that physical stimulus, and then my self, my higher self inside of me, responds to the way my body responds or interacts with it, and that's when the energy is created. And if someone does something kind to me and I feel love originates from my heart center, and it's a spiral of this energy. It comes out and it goes through my entire body and expands out. So like in this image, you see that I use that as in the body, the green spiral. So that's the heart. He's feeling love, energy, love, emotion, and it will spiral out, filter through the body, and then continue on like a ripple in the water. Have you ever dropped a pebble into a puddle or throw it in a lake or whatever? When something hits still water, it ripples out, right? And the ripples will continue to go until they find resistance. If it hits the end of the body of water, or the energy dissipates completely. There's no way that you can, well, I don't want to get to that point yet. Okay, so think about it like hitting the water and it ripples out. The energy, same kind of thing. The energy is created inside of us and it ripples out. And resistance comes in if we try to contain that. So if you picture throwing a pebble into the water and the water rippling, if you decide that you don't want that water to ripple, what are you going to do about it? Is there anything you can do about it? If you try to stop the ripple, you're going to destroy it. But you're going to make splashing in the water, so you're going to create more ripples, and probably worse ripples than the one you didn't like in the first place. And if you want to contain that ripple because you like it, you enjoy it, you think it's the best looking ripple in the water you've ever seen, and you try to push in the exact same spot as where the pebble hit, you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to get it perfect. It's never going to be, you can never contain it forever. These emotions that are created inside of us, they expand out until they're gone. And how long does it take for them to go? I don't know. They just do. They go on their own path, and they follow nature. I don't know. I didn't make up that part in my theory yet. But they just express out of us. But if we don't like it, we try to hold it. We try to stop the experience of it. If it's painful or uncomfortable, we try to hold it in there. Now we've resisted this energy. That's the resistance we're talking about. We've resisted this energy, and it stays inside of us as long as we keep pressure on it. And then we store that inside of us. And then that can get triggered by other things later on in life, and then it comes up to the surface, and we feel it again, and it hurts. And so we try to stuff it back down. We resist it. Now, that's the side of things if it's uncomfortable. You can take that image away now, JD, if you want, or leave it, whatever people prefer. That's the first poll in the chat. Would you rather look at the drawing or me? Those are your options. And if it's something that we like, if it's an energy that we like, sometimes we also resist that because we don't want it to leave us. So if this energy is expanding outward and we're losing the feeling, the good feeling, we want to try and contain that. So we try to wrap that up and pull that in. And we do that. It's the same kind of resistance. So we're storing this energy that needs to move, but we're trying to hold on to it. We either don't want it to be there in the first place, so we resist it, and that stuffs it down inside, or we want to contain it because we do like it, and we resist it, and that also stuffs it down inside. And you think, well, I don't want it. Why would that be bad to be stuffed full of good things? Because it's energy. It needs to go. It needs to expand. It's going to put pressure, and it's going to distract you from anything else in the future ever again. A lot of this I'm drawing from Michael Singer. If you're not familiar with Michael Singer, then this might sound familiar to you. But if you are familiar with Michael Singer, this is going to sound familiar to you. If you're not familiar with Michael Singer, this is brand new, and you'll think that I'm brilliant, but I'm not. It's all I'm taking it from Michael Singer. So Singer talks about if you go to a restaurant, you have a great experience, never, ever, ever go back to that restaurant again, because you have stored that experience inside of you as energy, and you've told everybody about it. So the food was fantastic, the wait staff was fantastic, the atmosphere was fantastic, everything went perfectly on my night at this restaurant. And so you store that inside of you. And everywhere you go, oh, this is good food, but it's not as good as that place. Or this nice restaurant's nice, but remember that place you went to and wherever that was better. And so you're resisting a good experience by trying to by keeping that inside of you, and then everything you experience from that point on, you filter it through that first experience, and you lose it. You lose what you could be experiencing in the moment. So this is the danger of resisting anything, is that we're now carrying it with us. Remember, if this light is you, this thing takes so long to turn on. Gotta hold the button down. There it goes. So if this light is you, and then our experiences are slowly blocking the light, so you can't see, you don't have yourself anymore. You're still in there, but you don't notice it because the ego is blocking it. That ego is the collection of all these things, all the times that you thought, well, this is the best restaurant ever, or this holiday was the best experience I've ever had, or that was the best concert I've ever been to, or that was the worst concert I've ever been to. This person is the worst person I've ever met, and I never want to talk to them again, or whatever the case may be. We have the experience. We create the emotion inside of us in response to what's going on outside of us. We store the emotion inside of us, and then we filter everything that we experience through that stored emotion onward. And it takes us out of the present moment. It puts us into fear of the past, or you can call that depression, or puts us into fear of the future, and you can call that anxiety. Either we're fearing the past because we're dwelling on the thing that happened, or we're fearing the future because we're afraid of it happening again. And so in either case, we've created resistance, and it's influencing everything we do going forward. We want to identify what those resistance points are in our life and let go of them. Well, the good news is you don't have to actually identify them at all. It's, again, Michael Singer talks about a last in, first out stack, LIFO stack, they call it in programming. He's a programmer. If you're not familiar with that, just think about like a pile of papers, a pile of anything. You put something down, put something else on top of it, put something else on top of that, and you keep stacking these up. If you want to get to the bottom one, in this case, you have to take the top off first. So you take the first layer off, and and then you take them off layer by layer. If we are resisting our experiences, we're putting new things on top of that stack. Every time you resist something, you put another layer onto that stack. Every time you put something onto that stack, you've now made it a longer time before you're going to get to the bottom of the stack. The first step is to stop putting those things on. If we can identify what resistance is, or how we create it, and then we can stop creating it, we stop stacking up, then these things will start to go away. What do you have to do to get rid of them? Nothing. And this is where, like psychology wants you to go back, or, psychotherapy and psychiatry and stuff wants you to go back, and maybe not wants you to, but the tradition or the stigma about that seems to be that we have to go back and analyze our past and then identify each thing that we didn't like or that was bad or was traumatic to us, and then do something about it. Well, what do you need to do about it? It's a stored emotion that hurt when it came in. It hurt when you created it, and all it needed to do was express itself. And we for whatever reason at the time, we weren't capable, we weren't mature enough, we weren't aware of how to, or it just hurt too much. And none of this, there's no judgment in any of this. We're all doing the best we can. And so there's no judgment here. But this is a theory of how this happens. We resist it. It's stored in there because it hurt. We don't want to let go of it because to let go of it means to experience it fully. We don't want to experience it fully. But we don't have to go back, and you can go back if you want to, and with professional help and support and whatever, and analyze your whole past and identify all the traumas, and that works for some people. So if you want to do that, go ahead and do that. This is not supposed to be any kind of, I'm not diagnosing, assessing, or treating anything here. This is just theory today. But you don't have to do that. You can just stop creating new traumas, stop creating new stressors and resistance for yourself, and then let things fade away as they will. It'll come up on its own because it's going to get rubbed up against something in the future. Remember, if we store these energies inside of us, they're in us, and then when you have a new experience, you meet a person that has the same name as that person that upset you years ago, just meeting them and being introduced to them and hearing their name will remind you of that stored energy, that resisted energy you have from the past, the resisted emotion. And just hearing their name will start to bring that back up to the surface, and you'll start to feel the pain associated with that past experience. You'll think, oh, people named that are the worst. And then you start to feel it again. But if you're not bringing these things in, now when that thing gets rubbed up against and starts coming up because you met the person with the same name, if you're not bringing that in all over again, oh, he's another person named JD. I mean, I have to use a name, so I'm going to use you just because no one else will take it personally. Everyone else, no. I know you won't take it personally, so I'm not worried about that. So I meet someone named JD. I used to know someone named JD, and it was a terrible experience. So now I meet a new person named JD. Instead of creating a new resistance, because when I meet him, then the emotion inside of me, if I'm not in control of this, we'll get to that in a minute, the automatic response might create a new emotion of anger or frustration or hurt, and I start to feel that. It reminds me of the old experience, and so that one I start to feel as well. And I don't want to feel that one either, so now I'm suppressing two things. But if instead I can meet this new JD and say, hi, JD, it's nice to meet you, and I might remember, oh, yeah, I knew that person back in the day that was named JD, and I didn't like that, but I'm not going to suppress it anymore. I'm just going to go, oh, right, I remember that. And now I'm letting it go because I'm not holding on to things anymore. So now it can leave me. It can just go. It comes off the stack, and it's gone, and the next thing comes up to the surface. I don't know. That's kind of, hopefully that was clear. It's kind of clunky how we got there. But so let's shift a little bit here. All right, so we've got, that's the process of how we create the resistance, or what the resistance is. Resistance is both something we do and something that's inside of us, I guess, in this context. So we have an understanding of what the resistance is, hopefully. I don't know how well I'm doing here. We'll find out afterwards. And once we've got all these things inside of us, now we've got a very muddled and filled up self, the ego, right? This illusion of the self. Maybe we'll get into that. Actually, I want to do this real fast. So this bottle, it took me a lot to figure out how to get the right kind of sediment to do this with. If you've ever, I don't know how well you can see, if it's very clear or not. It's kind of cloudy. It's not the clearest ever. But if I shake this up, so like you've ever stepped in a puddle or gone to a pond or a lake and you step into it and then the dirt all comes up, and now you can tell it's a lot murkier, right? What can we do to clear this? Is there anything that you can do to clear that? Time is it, yeah. So the Tao Te Ching says muddy water is cleared by letting it rest. This is your mind, right? This is your mind on worry. Remember the Saturday morning cartoon stuff? This is your mind on worry, or your ego with resistance. All of this stuff is in here. All of this stuff should have just floated through, but you kept it. You held on to it. So it's in here, and it's murky, and it's a mess. And what do? You let it sit. And you let it sit, and it settles. And that's the only way to clear this out. It'll settle. You can't see it on the camera. But I'm not going to hold it 'cause my arm will collapse. I'm not that strong. But it'll settle over time, and it'll become clear. And that's what we want to do. We want to settle. Anyway, so that's just something on the side. All right. What?
Until the next event kicks it up.
Right. Yeah. True. Yeah. 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 Right. So I met the guy named JD in the past. I had a tumultuous experience, and it was uncomfortable. It was all a mess inside. And then it settled, and I meet the new guy, and it's like giving another shake. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the ego. How's that form? If you haven't read the Four Agreements, then you should read that. And so I'll explain it briefly, though, as I like the framework for it. The author, Don Miguel Ruiz, uses the term domestication to explain basically what I've talked about as far as creating the ego through resistance. The the domestication process that we undergo, that's also what this is about, the light, and then all the stuff that gets in front of it and blocks us from recognizing that we are the light, that we still have that inside of us. And we get distracted by ego and all of that. That's the domestication process. So in the context of the 4 agreements, everything that we learn is an opinion. We learn the opinions of our parents, our teachers at school, religious leaders, political leaders. Everybody has an opinion. They share it. And a lot of times it's shared as though it's the truth. So like I said, I don't know what truth is. I'm not teaching I don't try to teach things. I don't try to say anything is the truth. All I'm doing is sharing opinions and theories, and then you can agree with it or not, right? And so that makes sense. If I say this is full of water and dirt, and that's a statement, is my observation, and so maybe we all agree on that, and we say, well, that's true because we all agree on it. But someone who's really into the science of things might have a different terminology for what's inside of this, and they might not say, well, that's not exactly true. Yeah, it's close, but it's not full truth. But we can still agree on the opinion that this is dirty water. When our parents teach us their opinions, they teach them to us as fact often, and we grow up, either we agree with them or we don't. Usually we agree with them, because as children we don't know any different. We don't have any awareness or additional knowledge or experience to go off of. We are taught things, and we just accept that as the truth. We make an agreement with it. So Don Miguel Ruiz in the book, The 4 Agreements, is identifying that process as domestication. He uses the example of if you have a grandmother who thinks it's important for you to eat all your food that she provides for you, and she says, a good little boy will eat his whole dinner, eat all the food on his plate. And so you, as a child, then think you're not good if you don't eat all the food, and she might remind you of that. And so through this process of, she gives you a plate of food, you don't want to eat it all because you're not hungry, you don't like it, whatever the reason is, but she says a good boy will eat all that food. You start to become domesticated into, I'm not a good boy if I don't eat this meal. And then at some point you grow up, and she's no longer part of your life. She's no longer sitting there telling you that when you're eating whatever, but you might still tell yourself. And so we are domesticated by the people around us, our caregivers, and then we continue that domestication process on for our whole lives until we become aware of it. Aware is another big factor, I think, in this. Aware is when we're consciously attending to something. There's all kinds of stimulus that's coming in all the time. There's sights and sounds and smells and touch, feelings, and all these things. All this is coming into us all the time, but we only attend to small portions of it. There's so much more information that we just can't attend to all of it. When we're consciously attending to something, then we're aware of it, and we want to act from a place of awareness. Whereas when we're in a state of awareness, then we can act with intentionality. And intentionality is when we're acting with purpose. If we're not acting intentionality, then we're acting from an automation process or compulsive reaction process, which is conditioning and training, which is back to what domestication is. So we are domesticated, and you think about that with animals. You take a wild animal like a cat, and they've been over however long it's been from the lion to the house cat, but the house cat has in it some elements of this DNA of one of the most lethal animals around, and yet he sits there and plays with a ball of string, and he's been domesticated. His natural instinct has been broken, has been taken out of him, and so maybe that's a harsh way to look at things, but I don't know. I think it fits. So you have animals that are domesticated. You have a horse. Their spirit is broken. They call it breaking the horse, to turn the horse in from this wild animal. We use wild to make it sound like wild is sometimes thought of not good. I guess when you're in it's thought of as chaotic, and that doesn't fit in with our society. So what do you say? It was a wild horse. Well, it's a natural horse. There's nothing bad about this horse. The horse is doing exactly what it was created to do. It's out there living free, independent. We have an independent horse, but people who want to control you will say independence is actually chaotic and wild. But we'll say that one for later. That's a different talk series, I think. So you have the independent horse. He's domesticated. His spirit is broken, and then he becomes subservient and docile, easily to control and obedient. And this is what happens with us. Remember, we are this. We are the light, and then we're taught over time that we're not the light. We're a collection of all of our experiences, and that's made up of all the opinions of the people around us, and we agree with those things. And then we start to live our life in accordance with those agreements until we become aware of it. And we can remember that this is actually who we are. We're the light. We're pure light. We don't need to participate in this domesticated system anymore. We can come back inside of ourselves to our authentic self and then act from there. We can act with intentionality from a place of awareness. If we don't do that, then we're continuing on in an automated process, and we are acting compulsively often from through conditioning. So this happens, and then this. So stimulus and response. If you're not familiar with Pavlov and the dogs from what was that? I don't know, it was the 1800s. The operant conditioning and psychology. A lot of people are familiar with it. So Pavlov was a scientist. He was studying digestion in canines, and they had this apparatus in the dog's mouth that would measure saliva, and it was for the purpose of measuring digestion. And they discovered that when they would feed the dogs, they would ring a bell to signify that it was time to bring the food out to the dogs. The apparatus was already in the dog's mouth. They rang the bell. After a few days of ringing the bell and the person bring the food out, they discovered that the dog started salivating at the sound of the bell. I'm not sure exactly when they made that connection, but the machines were in place, or whatever the apparatus was, to measure the salivation. And they said, well, this is odd. It makes sense that the food is there, the dog can smell the food, and then he salivates because the digestive system is engaging from the mouth right at the start of smelling the food. But to ring a bell and then to have the dog's digestive system engaged, that's not natural. And so that's what they come up with this terminology of conditioning. They were able to take a stimulus that's not associated with the natural response and create an inner response, a natural response to an unnatural stimulus. And that's part of the domestication process too, the conditioning experience that we all go through. We then learn to engage with life a certain way based on the experiences we have. Something happens, we respond a specific way, and then we develop patterns. And eventually we start to do things regardless of whether or not we want to, or if we're even aware of it. And an experience that most of us have is driving. You ever driven and you get to your destination and think, I don't remember driving at all. I remember being here. How did I do that? Did I run over somebody? Did I run stop signs? I don't know. You probably didn't. You probably drove perfectly fine because your body is so used to doing that behavior. It's so conditioned into it that it's able to do it automated. And there's a lot of things that we do in an automated process, and it's not a bad thing. It's really helpful to get through the day. We don't want to have to make a decision about every little choice that comes up all day long and put a lot of mental energy into it and make a specific choice. So it's good to have automation. But automation can also be against us in the form of addictions and different things like that, where something happens outside of us, our body responds, and then before the emotion follows right after, but we're not aware of that emotion that we're creating in response. So you have outside stimulus, the body responds, and then the internal story that's put to it all happens without us being present or being consciously aware. And this is where we get into addiction and stuff like that. Real over, like superficial generalizations, but that's basically the process. And we don't want to be in that place because now we are living in response to and in reaction to our environment instead of being a creator and being in control of it. And so again, just about identifying the points that we're doing this, becoming more aware of it, and then acting with intentionality. What's next, JD? Where are we at here? I talked for a while. I'm not used to talking by myself. I usually have these kind of conversations with people, so I rattled off all I got. I think I'm at the end of my. What time are we at? How long have we been doing? 20 minutes? 2:15. 2:15. Okay. Let me just check over what I know. See if I hit the things that I wanted to hit. All right. Yeah. So let's talk about overcoming the resistance. Then we'll wrap this up and see if there's any questions or anything. So I also don't like. People have told me not to say "so" quite as often as I do. Whenever I speak, I think of that. I don't want to do that, but I did it anyway. What? Family friendly, JD. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, right. It doesn't matter. I want to make an appealing product for people. I want it to be. I don't want to trigger people's resistances and upset their resistance. I'm not going to worry about it. I mean, it doesn't affect me inside, but I don't want to create a problem for them to whatever. Okay. All right, let's get back to this. So how do you overcome resistance? By stop bringing new resistance in. That's the key. So just become aware that we are creating resistance by the way we respond to a situation, and I'm sure I haven't gone into enough detail on that, so hopefully there's some questions, so we'll get back on point here. The opposite, well, not the opposite of resistance, is acceptance, is it? I guess you could say acceptance is the opposite of resistance. Acceptance is the answer. How do you overcome resistance? Through acceptance. And acceptance doesn't mean that you love it. Acceptance means that you accept that it is. Right now, the sun outside is shining through the window. There's more light in this room than there was earlier. Can I handle that? Can I accept that? Back to Michael Singer's terminology, can you handle it? That's, for me, I like that to understand acceptance. It's cold outside. If I walk outside without a coat, I'm going to shiver. Can I accept that? Can I handle it? There's a lot of things in the world that we have absolutely no control over. Pretty much everything. That would remind me of, I was listening to the Tao Te Ching earlier and took a capture of some of that phrasing. So this is from the Tao Te Ching. Well, there's a lot of translations of it. There's on YouTube, Wayne Dyer reads it, and I'm not sure who did the translation, but Wayne Dyer's reading it, so I'll call it his. So this it says, do you think you can take over the universe and improve it? I do not believe it can be done. Everything under heaven is a sacred vessel and cannot be controlled. Trying to control leads to ruin. Trying to grasp, we lose. Allow your life to unfold naturally. Know that it is too a vessel of perfection, just as you breathe in and breathe out. The key here is everything under heaven is a sacred vessel and cannot be controlled. Trying to control leads to ruin. If I walk outside and it's cold outside and I don't like that it's cold outside, I might develop some resistance. It shouldn't be cold outside. I wanted to get this task done today. I wanted to go have my picnic, but it's cold outside. Now it's uncomfortable. I don't like it, so I'm resisting that. Does it do any good to resist that? No. There's nothing I can do to change that. I can adapt myself to fit into that environment, but I cannot change the environment. There's nothing that I can do to change the weather outside. So can I accept it? If I can't accept it, I'm going to resist it, and I'm going to create problems for myself. I'm going to bother myself about that. If I can, so if I can accept it, then I can handle it. I'll go put a coat on, or I'll change my plans. I won't go in. When we started this today, and I had issues with the microphones. Did we handle it? Yeah. If we couldn't handle it, this wouldn't be happening right now. But it was annoying. But nobody got upset, lost their cool, smashed anything, broke anything. We didn't quit. We didn't give up. We handled it. So when we are faced with resistance or faced with an experience that's uncomfortable or comfortable, because resistance goes both ways, when we face something that we either don't want to experience or we don't want to let go of, we accept it. We practice acceptance by handling it. What can you do about it? Is there anything you can do about it? No. Accept it. Move on. So we let it go by letting it flow. Life is just flowing, and we're here riding on it. Alan Watts uses the imagery of you're on a river. Life is the river. You're going downstream. You're in a boat. You're going downstream. You can't row against the current. You can try, but you're not going to do it. You can't do it. You can't do it for very long, especially. So on the flow of life, we're just going with the flow. You can steer. You have a rudder. You can steer a little bit to the left or the right. Maybe there's a tree next to the river and it's really sunny out and you want to get in that shade for as long as you can, so you steer to the left. And you can have some preferences in life and go some certain directions. You can try and maneuver that way, but you're going in the direction that the river is going in. So you just let it go, the not wanting to go that direction. You let it go by letting it flow. You get into the flow of it, and you practice accepting it. So that's a deeper lesson if you want to explore letting go of preferences and not having expectations and stuff. Buddhism and Taoism can get into that, and that can be another topic, but I don't want to go too much into it right now. But you handle it. So then let's talk about the practical application of this idea. How do we handle it? Well, Joe Dispenza is another good name to look up. He talks about our thoughts. He's a neuroscientist. Well, he's a chiropractor originally, but now I'd call him he's an epigeneticist, neuroscientist. I don't know. He studies this. He's been studying this stuff for a long time. So he's pretty good authority on this element of behavior change. We have our thoughts. Our thoughts create our choices or lead to our choices. Our influence, I should say, influence our choices. Our choices determine our actions. Our actions create our personality, and our personality defines our personal reality. I usually will look at that as the environment around me, but the things that I have influence over. Do I put a poster on the wall? What kind of music do I listen to? That's my personal reality, my environment. If my thoughts lead to my choices to my actions define my personality creates my personal reality, and I want to change something in my life, well, where do I start? You can start at any point on there, but maybe you start with your thoughts. Let's say you start with your thoughts. Actually, usually it's personal reality is where you start, because if you're doing something outside of you, then that's your personal reality. My primary recommendation is to get sticky notes and you write down what it is you want to do differently, think about differently. For example, I was studying Reiki some years ago, and Reiki has 7 principles, and there was these mantras, and they use just for today, and then just for today I will do my work honestly, just for today I'll be kind to everything, just for today I will not get angry. And that was one that that stood out with me. I would often get frustrated with little things. If the printer doesn't work, I'm usually pretty patient with people, but I have a lot of frustration with stupid things like machines. Or they're not stupid, but when machines are acting stupidly. They don't act because they're not people, but when machines aren't going the way I want them to, when I resist my environment, then I would get angry. And so I wrote down these 7 mantras, and I would rehearse them every morning, and a couple times throughout the day I put them on sticky notes next to my computer. I had it on my phone. And for a few days, I would make it a point to read over these mantras and repeat them in my head. Just for today, I will not get angry, etc. And I discovered that after a little while, I started to think of them right in the moment when I'd drop something in the kitchen and I'd get mad, get angry in my head and frustrated, and then I'd immediately think, just for today, I'll not get angry. And it stopped me, and I didn't engage in that feeling any further. I let it go. And so I let that emotion, that anger that I just created anger, and then I just let it dissipate out of me, and it didn't last very long. And I let it go. So that's an example of how you can influence your environment to then influence your thoughts. So I had it written down on a sticky note. Then I thought about it more frequently. The more I thought about it, and it got into my choices. My choice was to get angry or not get angry when I dropped something. And then I didn't take any action about it. An action could have been to smash something or punch something or kick something or do something else because I was angry. And then if I do that all the time, if I'm constantly punching walls because I'm angry, then I become identified as someone who's angry and has an anger problem, and that's my personality. And then that's going to then influence my personal reality even further. So if you're looking for something that you can do, the easiest thing is get a packet of sticky notes and write down what you want to think differently. How do you want to think differently? What is the different thought you want to have? And start just look at it as much as you can. You have to break through. The neuroscience research that Joe Dispenza cites says that 90% of our thoughts are the same from day to day. If you think 90% of the same things from day to day, your actions are likely to be the same as they were the day before. You need to break into that. And you can break into that by changing your environment, putting up notes, whatever. So that's one way you can do that. And just a reminder, personality creates personal reality, not the other way around. So a lot of us think that our personal reality, our environment, influences who we are and how we become. And it does, to an extent. Remember the domestication process. If I can be a product of my environment. I don't have to be a product of my environment, but I can be. If I'm not exercising intentional actions, I'm not coming from a place of awareness, I'm going to become compulsively reacting to my environment. I will be a product of my environment. We are not that, though. We can be, but that's the ego. That's this layer, this illusion of self. But the light is not that. The light is the creator. So the light is acting from your personality, creating your personal reality instead of the other way around. Yeah, I don't know. I guess, what do you think? Let's sum it up. I don't know what else to really hit on there. So if there are any questions, we can hit those for now.
You have the importance of staying true to yourself while letting go of resistance.
Yeah, I'm looking at that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to. I think it's already said there.
Fascinating.
Yeah. All right.
Couple of comments here.
Okay, what do we got?
Acceptance is key, correct?
Yeah, I think so. Right, because if we're not accepting it, then we're likely resisting it. So again, to recap, if you're resisting it, you're creating new struggles inside of you. Michael Singer says, life doesn't bother us, we bother ourselves about life. So if you don't want to bother yourself about life, then you start to accept. You accept that it is. And reality is, whatever happened, has happened, is done. It cannot happen again. It can't unhappen. It has happened. Can you accept that? If you can't, then you're in a state of resistance, and you're going to create more bother.
I'm thinking of people who are getting diagnosed with something, whether it's addiction, whether it's cancer.
Addiction's not a disease.
Whatever it may be. Stuff that we have a very difficult time accepting, like politically.
Yep.
Who our next president has become. Wish that we could have it a different way. A lot of this is so much easier said than done.
Right. So what? You still got to do it. Yeah, it is. And we talked about that a few days ago when we were doing the show and talking about this event. And right, these things are not easy, but it is a simple process. If you don't want to be bothered by something, then don't be bothered by it. If you can get out of it, then get out of it. If you can't get out of it, then endure it. And it's not easy to do. It's very difficult, and it's usually very painful. Some of these experiences we go through. And that's where Stephen Pressfield talks about. Was that before we got recapped? We restarted. I don't remember if I mentioned Pressfield, but
No.
I think that was in this one. I don't remember. Stephen Pressfield is an author. He wrote a book called The War of Art, and he talks about how resistance can be motivating or can help us to achieve our goals. And you look at a blank page, and that's a resistance for the writer, but they are challenged by it, and it pushes them and makes them move and to do things. So sometimes resistance in a different context can be inspirational and motivational, but resistance is how we grow. I mean, if you think about weightlifting and strength training, if there's no resistance, there's no growth. If you lift the exact same weight every single time, years and years and years and years, you'll develop some tone, but it'll never get bigger. You'll never get stronger because you were facing the exact same resistance the entire time. So there's an element of resistance that's necessary, and this is where acceptance is so important. Well, I guess resistance, and I don't want to say that. There's not an element of resistance that's necessary. Resistance in this context, I want to stay to that. The context that I'm using that terminology in today, resistance is the way that we are experiencing the emotion that we've created inside ourselves. But there's challenges in life, or I guess if you go by the dictionary definition of resistance, then there is resistance in life. So it's a little confusing with the words here, but there is going to be challenge in life. There's going to be pain in life, and there's nothing that we can do about that. It's going to be freezing cold outside. It's going to rain when you don't want it to rain. It's going to be overwhelmingly hot when you have to do work on your house or whatever. There's going to be sickness. There's going to be injuries. These are things that we can't avoid, and it's all part of life. What we have is the ability to control how we respond to those things. Not if I hit myself with a hammer, I can stop it from hurting. Maybe somewhere somebody has trained themselves to do that, but I haven't. If I hit myself with a hammer, it's going to hurt. But does pain equal suffering? No. Suffering is the choice that I have about how I respond to the pain. If I resist the pain, I'm likely to suffer. If I accept the pain, well, I move on with my life.
Comment here from Kershaw. Working in the school and knowing several people who survived the death camps, I hear a lot about how conditioning plays a huge part in convincing people that they have no hope.
Say that again.
Working in the school and knowing several people who survived the death camps, I hear a lot about how conditioning plays a huge part in convincing people that they have no hope. Are we, or is society, doing the same with the immigrants from Central and South America and beyond?
Probably. That's a tough one. That's a big topic to get into. What our responsibilities are to other people. I have big opinions on that and stuff, but I'll try and keep it. We'll say that for another time. We'll keep it to the topic today. But so yeah, I think that culturally, we are conditioning ourselves. That's part of the domestication process. So we are domesticated by our parents and then everyone else out of there. In sociology, you call this the agents of change. These are the primary factors in our lives that give us our moral base and our understanding and all that. Our culture is a big, probably, second to our parents, the culture is the next step up. And that's such a hard one because you have a lot of pockets of subcultures within a giant culture. And then we have, in America, we have this tradition of being the melting pot of everybody bringing their cultures together and trying to fit them in together. I would say that culturally, conditioning plays a big part in that because we are getting caught up in through our resistance that we develop these biases, we have these beliefs, and then because of our beliefs, we act for or against something strictly based off of that. It's just our attachment to our beliefs. It's part of the ego. And then anybody who disagrees with us, we vilify and push away. And so that topic is hard to get into because we all have very different beliefs on it. So I think it's something that I love to talk about, but maybe not right now.
Dispenza talks about breaking habits, either things that we do physically or things that we do in our minds. A lot of us begin the day. We wake up. We haven't even moved. And we're already scanning the field like a computer looking for that negative thing. What's that big stress that we have to deal with today? What's that weight that we've been carrying over the last couple of weeks, or that event that took place yesterday at the office, or with my wife, or whatever? It's we scan, we find the negative, bang, it's right there. We haven't even gotten out of bed yet, and we're already spinning some momentum of negativity. And then what do? We get on our phones. Our phones are full of bad news or stressful text messages or things that reiterate the negativity, and then we haven't even gotten out of bed yet.
Right.
And then we get into these habits. Breaking those habits is very, very difficult.
Yeah, it can be, yeah.
And then you've got an energy that at some point it's either going to fester all day or all week or all month and then pop. Or we have to find some kind of healthy outlet to get it out, whether or not we're seeking some therapy, whether or not we're having a constructive conversation with our partner or our kids or our friends, or we're working out at the gym, or we're taking time selfishly for ourselves to do something that we enjoy, whether it's working on a car that you're restoring or building, or just sitting down and working on a puzzle or reading a book or sitting in your hot tub doing something just for you.
So yeah, and sometimes that can be resistance itself. If we're distracting ourselves so we don't have to experience it, that can be a form of resistance.
Breaking the habit of negative thoughts.
Right, and Joe Dispenza talks about being addicted to suffering, and that's a pretty real phenomenon. We're used to certain emotions and certain feelings, and so we keep doing things. We put ourselves in the same spot where we have things that are familiar, even if it's uncomfortable. You got that email still up? One of the images I sent you.
Yep.
Popped the one about this person jumping in a pool.
Yep.
It's pretty cluttered, but you can get the idea. This idea of being comfortable in uncomfortable things is the other one. The one that I told you was wrong before is the right one now. There you go. That's the one. Yep. Yeah. Pop that up there. This is an experience that you can probably relate to. It's on the screen, and you can read it, but I'll tell you what it means anyway. Have you ever been to a pool and it's hot out and you're comfortable, and then you want to get in the water and you put your foot in and it's freezing cold, and you think, well, I'm not getting that. And so you don't want to go in because it's uncomfortable. If you jump right into it, you're uncomfortable for a little bit, but then you adapt to it, and now you're comfortable. And so now where you were uncomfortable, you're now comfortable. You can become comfortable in an uncomfortable situation, and then you forget that it was even uncomfortable in the first place. And now when you come back out of the water, if you've been in there for a while, you jump out and you're freezing again. So where it was perfectly comfortable before and it was hot before you went in the water, now it's uncomfortable. And I don't know how well that works, holds up here, but it's this idea that sometimes it takes some time for us to adapt, but we can become uncomfortable, or we can become comfortable with uncomfortable things. We adapt into it, and I think that's part of the negative thought loops and the suffering cycles that we get into. What's happening with that is that we become comfortable in these uncomfortable situations, and because it's familiar, we stay there. And oftentimes it's built out of worrying, right? So we get the all shaken up, and then it clouds our mind again. I shook the bottle, but you don't have the picture on me, so it didn't matter that I shook the bottle. I realize now as I look over your shoulder. Now I'll shake the bottle, right? I forgot what I was saying.
Your mind gets cluttered.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So we get caught up in the worry. That's what it was. So we get caught up in the worry, and then we're thinking about all the things that could go wrong, and our expectations derail us.
What's the best way for people to contact you, Paul?
leave me alone is the best way. Leave me alone at gmail.com. No, just kidding. ImagineMovingOn.com. So JD mentioned that earlier. ImagineMovingOn.com. Imagine Moving On is a phrase I pulled from a book called The Biology of Desire that I read early on when I first started working. I'm a drug and alcohol counselor, in case you don't know me, which probably some people don't. I was going to talk about myself, but I didn't give you some background. Instead, I'm just a mysterious character. Well, if I start telling my story now, it'll be another half hour. I'm long-winded. But we'll just. I read the book, the Biology of Desire, and the subtitle on that is Why Addiction is Not a Disease. When I first started doing this work, I guess I'll tell that story because I was asked about that earlier, so I can fill in some details. I studied psychology. I have had, throughout my life, pretty significant experience with depression and anxiety. And so when I was 26 or 27, I finally decided to go to college, and I decided to study psychology to try and understand myself, my own experience, and that of other people in my life. And I studied psychology, and I thought that meant that therapy, becoming a therapist was the career path for that. But then I had a class on different careers in it, and apparently you can do all kinds of things with psychology. So then I completely abandoned the therapy route. And one of my professors actually said he had told us about how he had started out as a therapist, and then one day after a couple months of working as a therapist, he realized all day long I'm talking to people that are depressed and really miserable, and he hated it. So he decided to go and teach instead. And so I thought, yeah, that makes sense. I don't want to do that job. And then when I got a bachelor's degree, and it's hard to find a job with a psychology bachelor's degree that pays well and was sustainable and all that. So I worked in a psychiatric facility for a little bit. That wasn't the way the place was run. I think turned me off more than the work I was doing. But then I ended up starting a master's program, and I looked at addiction counseling and a couple other master's programs, emphasis. And then I settled on industrial organizational psychology, which it would be more geared towards business. It's human metrics, finding the right person for the right job for the right person, that kind of stuff. And that was really interesting to me. But the being a general psychology degree with an emphasis in IO Psych, that made it more applicable to a bunch of different jobs. Well, I got the degree and then spent a couple months, I think it was over a year, applying for different jobs and not finding anything at just the big push for you need to have the experience and the education. I didn't have any experience. I had some education, but that wasn't working out for me. And then eventually I saw the posting for a clinician job at the methadone Suboxone clinic. And I didn't think that they would hire me because I didn't have any experience. I didn't study counseling. I didn't study substance use. I didn't have any experience with either one. And but they hired me. I think most of my life until about 6 years ago, I was a participant in the church, and there was a lot. It was all volunteer clergy, so I have quite an extensive history of different leadership and teaching roles within the church, and that helped me, I think, in that job interview. But it turned out that I really, really liked the work, even though when I started out, I had no clue what I was doing in that context, I feel like. But I was told addiction is a disease, and so I accepted that. I agreed with that opinion that I was given, and then I found that book, The Biology of Desire, Why Addiction is Not a Disease, and I thought, that's interesting. Mark Lewis is the author. And I read that, and that one really shaped where I went from there and in the work that I was doing. That was probably in 2014, 2015, right when I started this. Anyway, in that book, see, I told you I was long-winded. There's a long backstory. In that book, he's talking about a person that he had worked with who had experienced addiction, and she'd overcome that. And now she was working in a residential facility helping for addiction rehabilitation. And he said she knew more than most, or better than most, that until you can imagine moving on, you're not going to have any change. And so we get into the Joe Dispenza, the thoughts, choices, actions pattern, breaking the habit of the negative thoughts and all of that. Until you can imagine moving on. That's why I liked that phrase so much. And then so I registered the .com, and I've had it all these years, and I haven't really done anything with it. So to answer your question, that's how people get a hold of me. ImagineMovingOn.com. I forgot how we got to this topic. But Imagine Moving On, because that's where it starts. If you can't picture it in your head, if you can't picture getting over the depression, getting through the anxiety, getting over the addiction, if you can't even picture it, you can't visualize it, it's not going to happen. You have to believe that it's possible. You have to be able to imagine it at least. And so that's where we're at. And what I want to do with Imagine Moving On is to get into a place where we can help people overcome resistance. That's where this came about. You and I have been talking, JD, you and I have been talking about this for a couple of years, doing these speaking events. This was something that you wanted to do, and I like that. And then I want to break into that as well and just be able to present more information to people, because if we don't have the information, then we can't act on it. We need to know it. that's why I think this format is going to be great. We can bring in a lot of different speakers and different perspectives, different opinions, and expand people's horizons and or minds and whatever. Yeah. What else?
We're thinking one per month.
Yeah, one per month. That's the plan.
All right.
And I think the in person will be good. This worked out okay, but it'll be nice to have more people, and we don't have to worry about the microphones and the technical difficulties.
Yeah.
So we created a survey that I guess will come up as a separate post. You'll post a link on the Nerd Out page.
Yep.
After, so if you've watched this, if you watched it live, if you watch it afterwards, look for that link. It's through SurveyMonkey. You can click on there. It's 9 or 10 questions, statements that you can click agree with, disagree with, whatever, and then a couple of questions asking about how this went, and then also what are some topics you might like to see in the future. That would be great if you can provide that feedback for us.
Yeah, Dr. Rick Barnett is going to be coming in at some point.
Excellent.
And tell everyone a little bit about Dr. Barnett.
Dr. Barnett is a psychologist out of Stowe, and he does therapy. He's the president or creator of the Vermont Psychedelic Society of Vermont, or Vermont Psychedelic Society, I forget which the terminology is. And so, which is a network of professionals in the mental health substance abuse field working with psychedelic assisted therapies, treatments, and also the social elements of it. They're pushing for legislation to decriminalize psychedelic substances for the purpose of therapy, and sharing all the research that's being done. There's a lot of research that indicates that psychedelics can be very beneficial in mental health treatments and substance use treatment, addiction treatments. So we're hopeful that becomes more of an option for us. There are ketamine treatments being used now, and so there are several practitioners, more every day it seems like, throughout the state who are qualified and credentialed to provide ketamine-assisted treatment. Ketamine is I think it's a synthetic psychedelic, and they use it in anesthetics in the hospital. Like I had it when I had a surgery, and I had given that, but it has positive benefits in treating anxiety and depression. So, but Rick is well versed in that field.
We also say that we welcome some ideas, like you alluded to, and we also welcome other speakers too to be coming in here. And there's a lot of expertise out there, and we're just barely scratching the surface here.
Yeah, and this doesn't have to be like this. I mean, we kind of thought of modeling after TED Talks to get this started, and this is just a live run. We're figuring it out as we go.
Yeah.
And open to whatever. The point, I think, is just to share information, to get community discussions going.
Yeah.
To help, in a like the topic of this topic, if we had an audience, a physical audience, we could address specific things.
Sure.
Potentially, if we were to hit on to more community-oriented things, like how do we handle addiction in our community, that could be a useful forum discussion. So there's a lot of things that it could be beneficial having people in place.
We all, in some way or another, seem like we need to hit the reset button in a few different areas of our lives. And some of this is super, super private. But to connect with people, I think that's one of the big takeaways here is connectivity. We need to connect with people. We need to be relatable and relevant with our topics here. And we're going to attempt to do that here with this speaker series.
Well, and that goes back to the question or the statement that you read earlier about how our culture is influencing the topic of immigration. That's a good one to have a discussion on. It's one that's so hotly debated. There's such a divide on that, and so there's some people that will not listen to anything from the other side. Doesn't matter what side you're on, you will not listen to anything. And those are the kind of conversations that we need to have. Nothing is too dangerous to talk about. We need to be able to sit and handle it. Can you handle it? Can you handle somebody has a different opinion than you? This last week was really interesting to me. On Thursday, I had a session with somebody who was very pro-Trump, and then on Friday I had a session with someone who was very much not that. And so I heard both perspectives, and I can relate with both sides of each one of their perspectives. And it was interesting. I learned some things, some information I wasn't aware of from one of them, but it was just interesting to see such a contrast between the two, and they both described a different world than the one I'm in. That's the interesting part. that they both have such strong opinions. We all do, and whatever, you find the thing that excites people. But it was really interesting to see the contrast in that. And I imagine it might be difficult for them to sit down with each other without dismissing each other right off the bat, and to actually have a conversation. And that's the acceptance part of it. I don't have to agree with you, but can I accept? Is it okay that you have a different opinion than me? You witnessed a conversation with me with somebody one time after a show, where I said, okay, we disagree. It's all right. We think differently. And the other person kept repeating to me that your opinion is wrong. I said, but it's okay that we have different opinions, right? And he said, yeah, but your opinion's wrong. And he was playing to some extent, but also the inability to acknowledge that, yes, it's okay that we have different opinions. I think that's a form of resistance. He's something inside of him. His ego wouldn't allow him to accept that. And that's the kind of stuff we got to be able to get past that so that we can have these conversations.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're not going to grow. We're not going to get anywhere.
Fascinating. Thank you, Paul.
Sure is. Thank you.
ImagineMovingOn.com.
ImagineMovingOn.com. Oh, yeah, I put up, there's 2 pages on there. I got suggested reading. I listed some books that I like. I haven't been writing about, but just if you're looking for a book to read, you can pop on there and see some suggestions, and then YouTube links to some videos that I think are useful.
Is that all on Imagine Moving On?
You go to ImagineMovingOn.com. In the upper right, there's a menu. I'm not good at web development and web building and stuff. It's all on WordPress, but it's just using their templates. But there's menus on the upper right. You'll see it. Suggested reading and YouTube links.
Thank you for doing this today.
Sure. Thank you. This has been fun.
Keep the comments coming, questions.
It's only going to get better.
Paul's going to be watching. Yeah. Thank you, buddy.
All right.